Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas Smith. I'm the head of business development at Netcapital. Let's give everyone a few moments here to get settled in. All right, looks like everyone's getting logged in. We do have a few items to go over, so I'm going to get started with that. And just to touch upon a few housekeeping items. As with all of our companies that we host our webinars with, Orbital Assembly is actively fundraising on Netcapital right now. However, Orbital Assembly is going to be closing their offering in just 9 hours. So if you're interested in investing in Orbital Assembly, please visit netcapital.com and search Orbital Assembly, or I will copy their investment link right now and put that in the chat. And at your leisure, you can certainly click it and learn more about this exciting company. Next, I want to mention that we do want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So please, when asking questions, use the Q&A function, not the chat, but the Q&A, and that will just help us stay a little bit more organized, and we'll be answering many of your questions. And I know there are a lot of investors that have invested previously in Orbital Assembly, as well as many who have not yet invested. We will do our best to cover both sides of the aisle, but with that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce someone who's become really a friend of Netcapital. He's the co-founder and COO of Orbital Assembly, Tim Alatorre. Tim, how are you today?
Doing fine. Great to be here, Thomas. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Tim. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. And just to kick things off, can you just give everyone a little background about yourself?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am one of the co-founders and currently the chief operating officer of Orbital Assembly Corporation. And prior to this, I've worked for decades in architecture and development, real estate, across a whole different number of sectors, from hospitals to restaurants, large multifamily and commercial buildings, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. And so I'm actually licensed. I'm a licensed practicing architect in a number of states. I've lost track of how many I'm licensed in. I also hold a national certificate with NCAR, which is a national organization that basically verifies the credentials of practicing architects. And so I come with a background of managing large teams, doing millions of dollars of construction work, and pulling together a lot of different partners, both on the design and engineering and development side, as well as the commercial development and the financial piece. I've also been a co-founder in a number of prior companies. My most successful is the architecture firm, which I recently stepped away from, which just celebrated its 10-year anniversary, actually. And that company continues to operate me with a more of a supporting role now, as opposed to dealing with the day-to-day operations. But that company does work across the United States, and my experience in developing and establishing that company translates really well to what we're doing here with Orbital Assembly. And so with Orbital Assembly now, I've taken all those skills of terrestrial development and now applying those to development of outer space, basically.
Appreciate you giving us the background, Tim, and your team that you've assembled. Can you talk a little bit about the folks that you work with on a day-to-day basis in the leadership team? Because it's a pretty robust team.
Yeah, we have a fantastic team, and we continue to develop it, right? It's not like a stagnant thing, like we're locked in, like these are the only people involved. So the co-founders who are currently still really involved with the day-to-day operations, we've got Dr. Tom Spilker, and he has he's basically a walking encyclopedia. The guy knows so much, and he and I are actually going to be doing a live Q&A on one of our other channels coming up in a week or so. But he's got a background with working with JPL and developing spacecraft. Has a real wealth of knowledge about orbital mechanics and orbital architecture and orbital operations. And so he's launched spacecraft to almost every planetary body in the solar system, and recently retired from JPL and moved over to work with us at Orbital Assembly Corporation. His wife, Linda, actually still works at JPL, and she's the deputy chief scientist for the Voyager project, which is amazingly still going. And so they're kind of a power couple. They know all sorts of stuff. Then we've got Robert Miyake, senior thermal engineer, and he also came from JPL, but prior to that, he worked with Boeing and a couple of other aerospace companies. Started his career developing aircraft, but quickly moved into space as that was, a developing market. And he also has launched thousands of satellites and developed numerous spacecraft. His resume is quite extensive, and anything power or thermal related, he's our guy. He manages that. And for people who haven't developed in space before, developing terrestrial applications, things here on Earth, it's pretty easy to get rid of heat. We just vent it out to the atmosphere. Things radiate very easily through different methods. In space, because there is no medium of an atmosphere, it's actually really hard to get rid of thermal energy. Very easy to get it, but hard to dissipate it. And so the thermal design of spacecraft is a really critical piece. So having Rob's decades of experience on every decision we make is really invaluable. It's hard to put a price tag on his experience. And then we've also got Jeff Greenblatt, Dr. Jeff Greenblatt, and he is currently our VP of Science and Research. He's also another co-founder, and he has, again, decades of experience, but his experience is more on the future-looking aspects of space technology, and really how do we incorporate all, like, he's worked in a bunch of different things, has had a number of startups, companies that are still ongoing, but his background is really looking at all the kind of the big disparate pieces of the whole science and technology world of space, and how they incorporate and integrate with what we're doing. And then his company Emerging Futures just recently got an SBIR for developing landing pads on the moon. So he's working on that on the side as well. So he brings a whole lot of just experience and knowledge of all these big picture pieces. He's also a really excellent program manager and is currently running our Pioneer Station project. He's the guy who keeps us all on task. Then we've got our CEO, Rhonda Stevenson, and while she wasn't one of the original co-founders of Orbital Assembly Corporation, we brought her in last May, and she'd been an advisor previously to that, but we consider her now a co-founder because she has really done a lot over the last year to bring us into kind of this next chapter of maturity in our business. And she also comes from a background of running a number of successful businesses in a couple of different areas. Her background wasn't originally in space, but she's moved into space. And so, like a lot of us, that outside knowledge of how commercial and industrial systems work outside of kind of the NASA bubble is really, really valuable. And then we've got some incredible board members who we brought in over this last year. We've got Bill Towski and we've got Drew Wall, who both collectively have, I don't know, probably 100 plus years of business experience. Drew in particular comes from a venture capitalist background and really knows the ins and outs of raising capital and financial management. And the two of them have been invaluable as we've honed our business plan and really dialed in on our strategy moving forward. So there's more people. We got Eric Ward and Shauna Pandya. There's a whole bunch of people on our team, but those are kind of the core people that I'll mention on this call.
No, thanks, Tim. And I know that personally, I've gained a wealth of knowledge and really enjoyed working with you and Rhonda and your team. And you've just really put together such a great group. And I think you all complement each other very well, because though you're outcome focused on the mission of Orbital Assembly, you do have very different backgrounds. So it's
right. Yeah, and we see that as a strength because
yep.
Somebody has one idea of way of doing it, and then somebody else can say, well, in this industry they do it this way, and then we can say, okay, well, what's the best, right? And we've been able to pull in ideas from a lot of different industries.
Yeah, and it's been a pleasure seeing that, because if everyone's the same, you might not be able to move the needle as opposed to folks with different ideas, and just seeing it from a different angle. So it's been a pleasure and a joy to really see from the vantage point of working with you.
Yeah, one of the challenging things, just to throw this in there, is we talk different languages, because the NASA JPL world, they have one term way of saying something. From the architecture and engineering for terrestrial applications, we have one way of saying something. Eric Ward, he's got experience in pharmaceuticals and development of commercial products, consumer products, right? and we have different words for the same thing. So it's funny sometimes coming from different backgrounds, we'll be saying, well, I think we should do it this way. And then we realize, oh, we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just different vocabulary.
Right. And Tim, this is great. We're seeing a lot of questions come in and folks posting where they're calling in from and tuning in from. We literally have people all over the world right now. So can you just give everyone just a brief overview of Orbital Assembly and the problem that you and your team are looking to solve?
Yeah, I hinted at this in kind of my introductory comments there, but Orbital Assembly is laser focused on making space accessible to everyone. And we've had a space station on orbit now for 20 plus years. I mean, if you count Skylab and Muir space stations have gone back even further to the 70s, but we've had people living in space continuously for over 20 years now. But it's been a very small number, right? There's been 600 something people who've gone to space over the last number of years. And until recently, the cost to get into orbit was, from the 1960s until about 5 years ago, it cost about $8,000 a kilogram to get somebody to orbit. And SpaceX, they've revolutionized that. With their Falcon 9 craft, they brought that cost down to $3,000. And with Starship and the other platforms coming online, we're going to see that coming down to a couple $100. And so the co-founders of Orbital Assembly Corporation, we saw what was on the horizon here, and we said, we have the technical know-how to have people live in space. And we're now getting the cost down to where we can actually get materials to space for a reasonable price point. The only thing keeping large numbers of people living in space is somebody to step up and make it happen. And so that's what we've been focused on. The company officially incorporated in 2019, but we've been working on this problem for a couple years prior. And that's what we're trying to do. We want to get large numbers of people to live, work, and thrive in space. And one of the big handicaps that we saw that is prohibiting that are the detrimental mental and physical effects of microgravity. And we need artificial gravity at some level to have humans be able to survive in a healthy way for long term in space. And so that's where we've been focusing on artificial gravity habitats. Now we have a number of different technologies we're developing. We have some trust building technology, and then we have our rotating gravity generating space stations. And we're looking to build the infrastructure to allow large numbers of people to live in space. And we've made some significant progress, and we're getting ready for our first station to be habitable in a little under 3 years as the timer there.
It's impressive, Tim, and it's amazing what you and the folks in your team at Orbital Assembly are doing. I'm actually interested in this question. We have a couple folks that have submitted, so I want to jump to the audience here. You hear of space, right? And just endless possibilities. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how big is the market for orbital assembly?
The market size is really hard to comprehend because the numbers are so big. Space is big and the market is big. One of the things that we've discovered as we've really driven and kind of dialed in on our market case is there's a lot of untapped potential and nobody really knows how much. There's been a lot of studies and a lot of forecasts. Bank of America, they did a study a couple years ago, and they estimated within the next 10 years the space economy would exceed $1 trillion, and just going up from there. In the near term, we see significant interest in manufacturing on orbit. There's a number of companies trying to tackle this problem. Microgravity in particular is really ideal for creating very precise crystalline structures. So that could be for advanced fiber optics, pharmaceuticals, advanced metals, where things on two alloys on Earth would separate because of different densities and gravity, but in a microgravity environment, you can get alloys to blend and create crystalline structures that aren't possible. So you get advanced metal generation, and so there's in the near term a lot of market for these sort of advanced manufacturing techniques, and a lot of research has been done on ISS, the International Space Station, but the International Space Station isn't set up for production scale manufacturing. It really is a research and it's a laboratory. It's called, they renamed the one module the National Laboratory. It's a lab. And you're working under, NASA oversight. And I don't know if people know this, but to have an astronaut work on your research project on ISS, they're charging $180,000 an hour. And so, and they limit how much time companies can use astronaut time. It's in single digits, the number of hours a company can have per year of astronaut time. And so there's companies that are wanting to build factories on orbit. And with our stations, our first one going up, Pioneer Station, that can be adapted to a purely industrial application where companies can do manufacturing 24/7 at an industrial scale and have their own people, or have our crew manage it for a lot less than $180,000 an hour. And there's some real profit cases there. So that's near term. Also, tourism is a growing market, but there's a smaller number of people who can do the tourist excursions in the near term. Right, the last flight to International Space Station was $55 million a ticket, and so that's cost prohibitive for probably most people on this call, and that will drop. We're seeing the launch costs come down, but the market is big, and as we start moving into cislunar space and resource utilization from the moon and asteroids and Mars over the next couple of decades, the market potential, we're just at the beginning of a real transformation in this economy.
No, thank you, Tim, for diving into that, because not only were a couple folks asking, I was also curious, and you just hear big, and and like you said, it's really in its infancy stages, so it's really exciting. I want to pull up some of the timelines that you have on your offering page on Netcapital. So we have a P-Star and Gravity Ring mission scheduled for 2023, the Pioneer class due in 2025, and the Voyager class due in 2027. Two-part question. Are you still on a timeline that you'll be able to hit those different milestones? And then secondly, what are you personally most excited about over the next 5 to 7 years?
Yeah. So the target date that we're really focused on right now is that 2025 Pioneer Station date. And if when we have that first station operational, that's going to change the dynamics of our company and space in general, right? And once we have that Pioneer Station operational, Voyager and larger stations are going to come. We were talking about the market previously. The profit, we project that the profit generated from Pioneer Station will be able to fund Voyager Station and subsequent stations, additional outside investment. So we're really focused on that. One of the things that's really evolved over the last year is our P-Star and the Gravity Ring mission. We had a D-Star event last year with our trust building technology, and we learned a lot from that. And going back and kind of examining what went well, what didn't go well, all the post analysis of that. We've actually got a partnership right now with Arizona State University, and for the last number of months, their senior students there have been doing computer simulations and modeling of the Gravity Ring, because we finished the engineering of Gravity Ring last year, and so we've provided all that data to them of the design, and we've been doing computer simulations, and the data coming back from those simulations has been really encouraging, to where we're re-examining if we need to do that mission or if we can just jump right to Pioneer. And so that 2023 mission, right now we're taking a hard look at that, because we might be able to save significant costs with the data we're getting from these models. And the real so there was a couple of main goals from that D-Star Gravity Ring mission. One was proving that we could control a station in rotation and developing the control algorithms. And then the other one was to get some near-term revenue by our customers to help offset the cost of that. But there's a lot more demand for habitable stations in rotation than there is for just uninhabited, a demonstrator ring, more or less, right? And so the customers that we're talking to are really clamoring for us to get to Pioneer as quickly as possible, and so that's what we're focused on. But the timelines right now, everything is funding dependent, right? So how well this raise does in the next 9 hours will feed into that. But we're also looking at other capital investment opportunities, and we have been focused on that really since the beginning of this year, lining up some larger investors. We aren't going to get to space, sadly, with what Netcapital is able to provide for us. Even if we raise the maximum amount allowable by the SEC, it would take us decades to raise the amount of money we need. So we're looking at other options. But assuming we can get meet our benchmarks for the equity raises, then yeah, we're on target for that timeline.
Thanks, Tim. And just to remind everyone, Orbital Assembly is actively raising and is live right now on Netcapital. You can visit netcapital.com and search Orbital Assembly. They're actually featured on our homepage as well, if you're interested in investing in this exciting company. And just a reminder, they will be closing their offering at the end of the day so that you have less than 9 hours to do so. Tim, just looking at a couple of your announcements that have come up in the past month. Your show, Our Future in Space. Can you dive into a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's actually, we've really appreciated the response to that. People have really responded well. One of the things that we wanted to do, I mean, really, it's a bigger goal of Orbital Assembly Corporation. You know, we're looking at getting large numbers of people in space. Part of that is getting people excited about space and understanding the need for going to space. And so we do have, as part of our culture advisory board, a number of prominent people in kind of the cultural sphere of space. So, and this might be a question coming up, I don't remember, but we have, Frank White, who wrote The Overview Effect. We have Janet Ivey, who is really focused on children's education and getting them excited about space and other STEM fields. And then we recently brought in Andre Bormanis, who he has been involved in sci-fi, kind of that world with Star Trek. He wrote for a number of Star Trek shows. He's currently working on a show with the Orville and another one. And so, part of it is understanding and getting that message out. And so Our Future in Space was really developed to have some of those conversations on a deeper level than might be had in some other forums. Definitely, on a deeper level than Q&A sessions or something like that. And then really trying to just get really in the weeds and nerdy about topics that we're passionate about. And so Our Future in Space is looking at what is possible. Oh, am I freezing? Okay. What is possible, 10, 20, 30 years out? Where is space and orbital assembly? Oh, sorry, I'm getting some computer lags on this side.
No, you're okay.
Where is space heading? And getting people excited about that big picture and the vision of space, right? Just in general.
No, it is exciting because I think the intrigue here. There's so much unknown, right? And to, like, we talk about the investment opportunities in space, it's so big, so it's really exciting. A couple folks have asked about, we've been seeing in the news for the past year, 2 years, kind of what Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and those folks are doing. Has that helped at all with the path to trajectory and what Orbital Assembly is doing?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes, absolutely. There's a lot of space startups. There's a lot of companies and excitement about space right now, and all of that helps, right? We're building an ecosystem and an economy in a new environment, right? And the more people we have involved, the more dollars and companies working on this problem, it's a rising tide for everybody, right? I think SpaceX in particular, with what they've done to lower launch costs, has made companies like ours possible. Had SpaceX not done what they did with rocket reusability, what we're trying to do would be a non-starter, right? If we were trying to do this back in the 80s, where unfortunately during the shuttle program, the price to orbit was a lot more than $8,000 a kilogram. It was, depending on how you measure it, $20,000 to $100,000 a kilogram. But today, because launch prices, and there's other launch providers, right? You've got Rocket Lab, you've got ULA, you've got Blue Origin, SpaceX. There's competition in the marketplace, so that is really key. And Blue Origin, on a certain level, are competitors of ours. There's also Axiom Space and NanoRacks, and there's a couple of companies developing space stations. And I get that question a lot. Are you worried about what they're doing? No, we're not worried about what they're doing. We're tackling the problem from a different standpoint, right? Specifically, Axiom Space, who's working in partnership with NASA, they just have to move at a slower pace because of just the NASA processes. But then also, the more companies we have building things in space, like I was saying, this market is so big. There's not going to be just one company building space stations. If you look at, I don't know, pick a city anywhere in the world, there's not just one construction company building in that area, right? And so we're excited to be one of several companies that are tackling this problem. And we're tackling it with the artificial gravity side, focusing on that. And we feel that that is going to be the future, that other companies eventually are going to tag along. We've heard from some of our competitors that they're hoping to do artificial gravity stations by 2050 and somewhere in that time frame. I think they're probably going to end up doing it sooner, but it's coming, right? And we're just excited to be on the forefront and pushing the dialogue and the conversation forward.
No, absolutely. And before the next question, I just want to remind everyone, I see a lot that's going into the chat. If we could migrate that over to the Q&A, please. We'll try our best to get to all of your questions, but it just helps us stay a bit more organized. Okay, so we are in April of 2022. Between now and the end of the year, what are you specifically most excited about?
Well, one of the announcements we made this last year is we've relocated our headquarters to Huntsville, Alabama. And that's been really exciting. We've received a really warm welcome. I'm actually sitting here in my office in Huntsville today. And we're looking forward to getting our integration and testing facility set up here in the Huntsville area. And by the end of this year, we should start having hardware, rolling off trucks and starting to be put together. And so that's going to be really exciting. Last year, when we had the D-Star components delivered to our facility in Southern California, that was just such a thrilling experience, right? Things that we've been working on for paper for months and months and months, seeing it and getting to touch it and having it cut your fingers, and that was fun. So, well, maybe not the cuts, but the experience, the physicality of it. And so we're really looking forward to having that, happen with now habitable structures. And the first components that should be rolling into our facility will be the long lead time items on Pioneer, things that we really need to use to start fitting everything together. One of those key pieces that we're really focused on is getting the mock-up of our module in the facility, so we can start planning out the interiors and piping layouts and how the environmental control and life support systems come in. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to this year.
Thanks, Tim. And when just the overall general business model, and people have invested in your company, people are tuning in right now, thinking about investing. Can you just talk about the business model and really how Orbital Assembly plans to make money?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different markets that we're targeting. I already mentioned the industrial and fabrication side. And so one way that we make money from that is from companies leasing space on our stations, right? There might be a company who wants to do a trial run and use the station for 3 or 6 months or a year. They can do that. Also, we're looking to build, made to suit stations. So if a company wants to do something long term and they want to buy real estate on orbit and run it for 10 years, we can build them a station tailored to what they want to do. Then there's a lot of interest in academia and also just in the science community about doing research for artificial gravity and low gravity environments. There's a big push right now, a lot of money flowing into lunar development. And of course, SpaceX is really focused on Mars. Running a science experiment on the moon is very costly, right? You got to launch it, you got to land it. Then you have time delays of getting data back and forth. And so there's companies we're talking to that are developing and want to do science for the lunar environment. We can do that on our stations, right? We can have a low gravity lunar simulant in LEO, which allows them a more secure and easy way to get stuff back and forth. You're talking days, not months. And then the time delay is a lot shorter. So you can get really quick interaction with your stuff. And then also we'll have people on board so you can do human-tended experiments. So that's another piece to it. Also, there's a lot of interest in tourism right now, but there's nowhere for people to go, right? Blue Origin is sending people up in little hops. SpaceX has done one official tourist mission, which orbited the Earth for 3 days. Their most recent mission that was in collaboration with Axiom, that was they were, Michael Allegria was very clear: we're not tourists, we're private astronauts. We're working on a mission. But for tourists, there's really no destination. So Pioneer Station, that class of stations, is in the time scale, a really near-term opportunity for tourism. And the tourism dollars, there's not really, there is profit to be had there, but again, the market right now is small. Until we can get the cost down, that's not going to be probably the dominant the market for that. So going back to where Orbital Assembly is making money, we've got build-to-suit stations, we've got leasing of stations, and then concurrent with leasing of stations, working with partners who are providing services on our stations.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you providing more context to that. And okay, so folks have invested in Orbital Assembly. This is the second round of your company raising capital with Netcapital. Can you talk about down the road some potential exits for investors if they'd be interested in that?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the Netcapital platform treats exiting, but they can reach out to your team to talk about that. As far as the company and potential exits, right now we're wrapping up the engineering design of Pioneer Station. We have a high-level architectural design completed. Now we're moving into the more what is called PDR. We're getting to preliminary design review, and figuring out what's going where and what the system is. Once we get to that level, the PDR, we have IP that could be sold, right? We don't right now want to sell the company. We want to take this in the future, but a potential exit could be to sell the company and all of its assets and intellectual property. At that point, again, when we get to the next kind of phase, which is CDR, which is where we're ready to cut metal, that would be another potential exit point. And then once we have our first station operational, the whole company could be sold or acquired at that point as well. Also, there is the possibility at some future point, of going public and listing on IPO, and that would be another exit point for individual investors. All these strategies right now are, we're not focused on any one of those. What we're looking at right now is, again, getting Pioneer operational and getting profitable, and then taking the company to the next thing, which is a fleet of Pioneer stations and Voyager station, which is our much bigger flagship project.
No, absolutely. And it's just again, going back to the opportunity, right? It's so big. It's really in its infancy stages, and it's just a really exciting time, in my opinion, for you, the team, Orbital Assembly, and we're excited to be along for the ride with you, Tim. So thanks for providing more context there. A couple of folks have asked questions about just how environmentally cautious Orbital Assembly is. And you see, what's been televised by Bezos' company, as well as Elon Musk and things like that. Can you touch upon, Tim, the being environmentally conscious of what you're doing, and as you're going to start to manufacture different aspects of Orbital Assembly?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a conversation we've had a lot internally. Jeff Greenblatt, I mentioned, he's our VP of Science and Research. He's actually done quite a bit of work with his different consulting companies on environmental impacts and how to create less impact on the environment with different space development projects. So he's been a consultant on that. And he and I have had a number of conversations. Myself, with my architecture practice, I hold some certificates with the different organizations for green architecture and sustainability. I put green in air quotes because all of this is really a pseudoscience, in that the effects and the cascading effects of different actions are really hard to quantify, right? And so it is something we're talking about, and it's something that we're focused on. How we implement that is still to be determined. Like, we don't have any strict policies or procedures yet, but one of the things that we are excited about is we feel that space development, just by its very nature, pushes environmentalism and protection of the Earth, right? And let me explain that. So our stations, the goal is to have them to be completely closed loop, where there's no waste. Everything is reused, recycled, repurposed. It's even at a couple $100 a kilogram, it's still expensive to get materials to space, and we want to make sure we're using everything that we can. For example, wastewater, having that be closed loop, and thinking about what packaging and shipping materials we use, and not just throwing away trash, right? We don't want to just deorbit stuff and have it burn up in the atmosphere. So the technologies that enable that naturally translate back to Earth. I think the biggest environmental sink on or hit, I guess, on space development are the launch vehicles, right? And I think one of the things that we've seen that's going to make the biggest difference are these new methane rocket engines. Methane is a renewable resource. We can make methane by extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water and hydrolysis, and it is a renewable resource. And so I know SpaceX in particular is focused on this because they want to get to Mars and be able to generate rocket fuel on Mars, and there's no fossil fuels on Mars, right? There weren't dinosaurs there. so they're looking at sustainable renewable options, and we're seeing that now with the industry. There's other companies that are moving in that direction. So once we get to the point where all of our rocket fuel and the propellant is renewably generated, and we're no longer depending on RP1, RP2, which is a kerosene-based fossil fuel propellant, that whole launch cycle starts to be closed loop as well. So we are focused on that. We have talked about internally again how much we want to commit, and as a startup, it's really hard to make really broad brush commitments because we need to do what is going to get us to that finish line the quickest. Not to say we want to destroy the planet in the process, but it's balancing, what is a reasonable goal now versus long-term, where can we end up, right?
Really appreciate that, Tim. And I know that's something that folks have been asking, and that's important, right? But knowing you and your team, it's been brought up to us several times, and I know you're very conscious of that. So we appreciate it. I know, folks that are listening in do as well.
And just on a day-to-day thing, like when we get together as a team, we have different events. We try, within reason, to be environmentally conscious, and not, not pollute, create unnecessary waste, eliminating plastic where possible. I mean, there's so many things just all of us can do on a day-to-day basis that really make a much bigger impact than what the space industry is doing right now. I think it's the scaling of that, right? If we're moving to multiple launches a day, that would have a significant impact. And so, we're conscious of that, and we're working on it. And it's a conversation that we will have many, many more times over the next number of years.
No, absolutely. And Tim, I find this question to be kind of fascinating. So a couple of people have asked it in different ways. So I'm going to try my best to put it all together. But let's talk about, like, right now, what is required by someone? So I, Tom Smith, want to go to space. What do I have to do in terms of preparation to get myself ready, if anything? Is there any preparation involved? And I know a couple of folks have asked, okay, what is going to be required to go to space when Orbital Assembly is ready for liftoff? So that might be hard for you to answer because we're a few years away from that, and things obviously are evolving and changing. But right now, what's required by the average person like myself or you, or to prepare to go to space?
Well, there's a couple different ways to get to space right now. Probably the least, the method that requires the least preparation would be to jump on either a Blue Origin rocket or the Virgin Galactic's rocket. I don't know if they really do any training. You pay your money, you hop on, you get a little suborbital hop, you get to see space, you get to float around in weightlessness. Everybody's happy. Assuming we're going to orbit, which I think is where the question is heading. Right now, the only company that's taking people to orbit is SpaceX. And so we've seen a couple of examples in recent years of the preparation people have gone through for SpaceX flights. Obviously, NASA they do extensive training with their astronauts, and they do, they have their own programs and requirements. So if we look, and then also with the most recent flight with the Axiom launch, they were going more as private astronauts, not so much as tourists. And so they went through a fairly similar program. And so I think the most relevant example right now would be the Inspiration 4 mission. And they treated that as a very regimented mission, and they did months of training. How much of that training was really required by SpaceX and how much was voluntary? Those lines are kind of blurred, right? Because there was a lot of team building, and they wanted to make sure people psychologically could work together on that mission for 3 days. And they really wanted nothing to go wrong, because just from a PR standpoint and a safety standpoint. So that was months of training. And on that mission in particular, there was a lot of training on how to operate the spacecraft and plan for different emergency situations and contingencies. I think as we move forward into true tourist activities on orbit, you're going to have a couple of crew people who are trained in all of those things, all the emergency contingencies, true pilots, right? There's probably going to be commercial certifications of some sort to say, yes, I am a pilot for the Dragon spacecraft. And then the tourists, I would imagine, would have a lot less training. Now, for us, and I can talk a little bit about Orbital Assembly, because 2025 is just around the corner. So we're already talking about crew preparations and who do we find to go on that. In the early days of Pioneer Station, is most likely going to be crewed by our own private astronauts. And so we are looking for people who have space experience, who've been to space before, and that's a very limited pool, right? But as we move forward, that will branch out to people who haven't had experience. But for our crew, they're going to have probably the same level of training as at least the most recent Axiom mission, but they're going to have to understand all the system components on the station, all the emergency procedures, first aid and medical experience. There's going to be a lot of training. But then again, as we move into the tourist phase, the tourists will have less training.
Got it. I appreciate, Tim, you giving us that broad brushstroke of both kind of now and a couple of examples, as well as what you're thinking about, because you're right. 2025, it seems like, oh, it's a few years away, but it literally is right around the corner in terms of how you're planning and really having to prepare in preparation to that with sending folks to space. And just as a reminder for everyone, I just got the ticker. It updated on my screen. 8 hours. You have 8 hours to invest in Orbital Assembly. If you choose to do so, you can visit netcapital.com and search Orbital Assembly, and they're also featured on our homepage. And check out this exciting company, read more about Tim, the team, and really this very ambitious goal of that they're hoping to achieve. And it's just an exciting time for Tim and the company. Tim, I know we only have a few minutes remaining. With 8 hours being left and this offering closing, you personally, people hearing it from you, why is now the time to invest in Orbital Assembly?
Well, there's a couple reasons. For one thing, so right now we are doing what is considered a CF round, right? A crowdfunding round. It's I guess the SEC considers it a type of friends and family round, right? And we're still at the very beginning of our capitalization plan and the company. And I can't make any predictions about the stock price and where it'll go in the future, but my goal is that the price only goes up, right? And so if you're wanting to get in at the best possible time, this, again, I can't make any promises or anything, but my instincts, and I will work very hard to make it this being the best time to get in. There's also, I'd say another thing, we don't know exactly where our capitalization plan is going to go over the next year. And when the next year rolls around, we would love to do another round of Netcapital, but we don't know where we're going to be, right? And so there's no time like the present. The round is open, and we don't know when it would open again to do another round. We are limited by SEC on how often and how much, right? And then I think the other piece to that is right now is probably the point where the individual person can have the greatest impact on what we're doing. When we get to, in a year or two, the dollar amounts that make a significant difference are being measured in millions of dollars, not hundreds of dollars. And so right now, for people who want to support us, you can have the greatest impact on what we're doing today. Um, Not to say in 2 years, if you wanted to buy me lunch, I would turn you down, but right now, $100 or $200 can mean the difference between, um, bringing on another engineer or bringing on a consultant to do a key part, or, filing that patent application, or, having that key meeting with a venture capitalist, right? So there's a lot of pieces that we're working on right now, and how much we tackle and how quickly we tackle it is all funding dependent. So and then also I would say that now is a good time because uh, in 10, 20 years, like I said, there's going to be lots of companies building space stations. Uh, Orbital Assembly will have our fleet of stations up there. There may be, there will be other opportunities, right? There's going to be other companies, other public companies, other things. But to be able to brag, to say, hey, I was there at the very beginning, like how many of us would love to have said, hey, I was one of the first investors for Apple or Microsoft or Tesla, right? And I can't guarantee we're gonna be as successful as them, but I really hope, and we're working everything as hard as we can to make that reality.
No, absolutely. And Tim, knowing you and Rhonda and the team, you guys are working so hard to make this come to fruition. And really, just on behalf of Netcapital and working with you and our team, thank you. It's been a pleasure. We hope to do, a future round with you, but we're just excited to see, month over month, things are changing and we're getting exciting updates. So we're just excited to see where the company goes between now and the end of the year, what's in store for 2023. You alluded to a lot to this 2025, this being probably the biggest year that's coming up. So just congratulations on everything that you've done and your team up until this point, and we're excited to continue to see where things go. As a final reminder, netcapital.com, less than 8 hours for you to invest in Orbital Assembly if you choose to do so. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Take care, Tim. Thank you.